Okay, we are live. Welcome to the People's Basics. It is Thursday, April 8th, and today we are having another Commoner's Corner segment where we get to talk to regular folks like you about what the basic role of government should be to its people. We want to encourage you all to sign up yourself to come tell us what you think one of the basic responsibilities of government is to its people and the top issues we should be addressing, as well as making sure that you can help us please those algorithm gods to help grow the People's Basics by liking and sharing today's video. With us today on the program, we're going to be talking to Brian Winters. We'll be hearing about what he thinks that basic role and responsibility of government is. Without further ado, let's bring him onto the program. Brian, welcome to the People's Basics.
Hey, good morning, John.
Good morning to you as well. So, Brian, for the folks out there who might want to know a little bit more about yourself before they care about what you have to say about what the basic responsibility of government is, can you let folks out there know a little bit more about you, where you're from, what you do, and how you politically identify?
Sure. I live in New Hampshire, which means I've been fortunate to see the presidential primary a few times and meet Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard and a bunch of other great candidates. I used to serve in the state legislature here, and as a Democrat, but I realized that the system wasn't working, so I started looking for better ways to fix our political structure. And these days, I identify as an independent or a reformed libertarian.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. When it came to that realization moment, I think a lot of people, even myself included, feel very bound to the two-party system because of the structure of our democracy. Obviously, you previously were aligned with the Democrats and were identified as such. What changed that made you realize you wanted to switch to becoming more of an independent and identifying as a libertarian?
Well, it wasn't so much that I identified with the Democrats as much as you have to pick a party. It's a two-party system, and you have to pick one if you want to be successful. Here in New Hampshire, we have 400 representatives in the state house, and out of the 400 representatives, they're all either Republican or Democrat. You can't get elected as an independent. And so the Democratic Party, especially back in 2006 during the height of the Iraq War, was the party that I most closely identified with. Go ahead.
So then let me ask you this question. Obviously, there can be a lot of different theories of what is kind of causing that dynamic, but I wanted to hear in your mind, why do you feel like it is such a forced choice for so many people?
Because the Republicans and Democrats have controlled the political structure for 160 years since the Civil War. And they control the legislative process, they control the electoral process, and they do everything they can to keep the duopoly in charge. There's a great book by Catherine Gell called The Politics Industry, where she goes into more depth about how they control the political structure.
Okay, so going off of some of the things that I know personally from Catherine Gell's writings, one of the big things that they talk about is the voting systems, and they have this, what's it called? The Final Five voting is what I think they call the system that she has, where the big thing that she sees as the issue is how we have all these individual different primaries. Do you think that is the big issue? It's the way we vote, as well as having all of these individual primaries, that is mainly causing us to have to go to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? Is that the big thing that's holding us in duopoly?
No. Well, she's not wrong. The way that we vote is very broken, and her innovation, the Final Five voting, is a great innovation to help bring more choice and more accountability. But ultimately, all these voting reforms are just means to an end. What do we want at the end of the day, John? We want a government that looks out for the people and makes sure that their basic needs are met. And so rather than get hung up on the different ways to select people to go to Congress and work out these deals, we can skip that step and just crowdsource what it is exactly we want government to do ourselves. And then as a block of swing voters, we can leverage those votes and force Congress to act, to do something for the people instead of for themselves.
Could you elaborate on that. I know this has been one of your big focuses, Brian, is crowdsourcing of, frankly, potential government services or what we should be doing in general. Could you talk a bit more about how you envision that kind of playing out and things being decided?
Sure. And I guess the place to start, though, is what should government be doing? And
Yeah.
as Americans, we have five duties, both individually and collectively, and they're laid out in the preamble to the Constitution. Our duties as Americans are to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what government is supposed to be about. And we've lost track of that. We're clearly not establishing justice here in America with 2 million people behind bars. We are not promoting the general welfare when we have 40 million Americans that are living in poverty. We There's a lot of problems in this country that could be addressed. And so the American Union is a block of swing voters supporting a legislative package that will address those things and address Martin Luther King's triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism. And so the legislative package would end poverty with universal basic income and some other things, and mass incarceration through police and prison reforms, including ending the federal war on drugs, and end the endless wars by bringing our troops home and downsizing the military. And Martin Luther King identified these three evils together because they're all interrelated. And so by solving them all at the same time in one legislative package, we can move our country forward and as he said, boldly challenge the status quo.
Mm. Yeah, and I have to say, this is in my mind largely that positive sense of what libertarianism can become. Because I think that many people kind of think more on the economic type of things of trying to just simply deregulate everything. And I just don't think that is the case of what libertarianism should really mean. It's establishing both positive and negative freedoms, positive and negative liberties, I should say more precisely, where we need to establish these basics like a basic income so that people have the positive freedom to do as they wish and please, and not be coerced into financially abusive situations. And then furthermore, the things of making sure that there isn't acts of aggression unnecessarily of imprisonment and war, I think is a very good ideal towards, what you said as a libertarian independent. And so I'd love to ask you, you said swing voters, though. That's this coalition. Why do you think that is specific of how you need to try and coalesce people? Are you not looking necessarily for New Yorkers in safe blue areas or Californians or Alabamans? Like, what makes the swing voters particularly who you want to focus on?
So, like I said, I've been involved in politics for a while, and to be at the third parties don't work. We've seen many attempts over the years, but to win as the third party, you need a block of like 40% of the votes to be able to have a chance to defeat the Republicans and Democrats. But as a block of swing voters in the middle, you need about 3.5%, and you can decide the outcome in a lot of close races. In 2020, more than 60 congressional seats were decided by the winner got less than 53.5%. So if you can create a national block of swing voters, people who are willing to vote for either Republican or Democrat based on their own metric, they can decide the outcome, and that leverage will force Congress to act because they all want to keep their jobs, and we should want to see Congress succeed, right? Congress has a terrible reputation, not undeservedly. But as Americans, we should want to see them succeed. We should want to see all Americans succeed. We're all in this together. So let's give Congress something great that they can do: end poverty, end mass incarceration, end the endless wars. And if they do it, we can reelect them.
So let me ask you this question, Brian, because maybe this is my own personal bias, but I think some of the ideals that you're advocating here tend to less be often the exact center of America and tend to be a little bit more left leaning, if I'm frank. Not that there couldn't be people who are conservatives who have support for any one of those specific issues, but as a package together, I do think it's a little bit more left leaning. And so I wanted to ask you, how do you think you can try and take this and become a message that is truly the message of the swing voter. Because, you know, what we have in DC, at least preached right now in terms of bipartisanship, goes squarely against these things, even though the things that you're advocating for are popular with the broader consensus of Americans. How do you try and turn that into kind of a new sense of centrism in a way?
So, John, a couple things. You hit the nail on the head. These are popular with a lot of Americans, but we don't feel like we have a choice. We have to pick either the Republican or the Democrat. We always have to pick the lesser of two evils. And so, by coming together as a block of swing voters, we can say no. We refuse to play this game anymore. We refuse to let you pit us against each other. Instead, we're going to cooperate as Americans and unionize as voters and try and win us all a better social contract. And so you asked, why do, yes, this leans more left than to the right. And that's because, the very word conservative comes from the idea of conserving the status quo. And the status quo is broken in our country. And so we need to find a better way forward that enables all Americans to succeed and to thrive. That's what will make our country great.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. So, I mean, here's my other question. We had a similar idea, not necessarily go as far because it wasn't being planned out as a long-term thing, but a one electoral cycle process for 2020. There's this notion of a unity 2020, a dark horse duo running. And it was this idea of, again, trying to get people from both sides who could be potentially swing voters to simply reject the duopoly. What do you think is going to be the big difference in kind of the approach of how this comes about? Do you see it as something that focuses on just like the presidential cycle, just focuses on Congress? Where is that focus that you can actually try to keep these people together rather than have it like be announced like hypothetically in the 2020 election? If you picked Joe Biden, does that swing voter group stay together, firm together, or do some split off and decide to go Trump? How do you try to take a tactical approach to achieve what you're desiring here? Because I think we've had several groups in the past say we should have this consensus of centrists working together and kind of being the check on the duopoly, but they never flourish. So what's the tactical strategy for getting this off the ground?
So, the Unity 2020, for example, it was an attempt to run a third party, even if you don't call it a party, but a third option, which many people, including myself, would have loved to see. It was great that we had the two oldest, whitest candidates ever, but I would have liked to see some more choices, but we didn't have them. At the end of the day, Republicans and Democrats win 99% of the time. And so let's just acknowledge that as a fact and then figure out what can we do to gain influence over the process. And the way to do that is by becoming the deciders, being the ones who, in Georgia, for example, control of the Senate boiled down to about 29,000 people. If they voted one way, the Republicans would still have control. If they voted the other way, the Democrats obviously have control now. And so rather than, and in Georgia, for example, the two parties and their allies spent $840 million for those Senate runoff races over 2 months. There's no way that any grassroots effort can compete with that. But by focusing on the narrow slice that will decide the outcome, if you can organize 30,000 people who can say, look, we're going to decide who controls the Senate, what's in it for us? We want you to fix these problems. That's the way that we can get leverage over them. So rather than trying to like I said, we want to see everyone succeed. So what can we do to make Congress successful where everyone would love to reelect them? End poverty, end mass incarceration, and the endless war.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly agree with you there. And I think there is clear evidence to the influence of swing voters. You could take this most recent cycle, you cite Georgia. I think a lot of people here are aware of what the Lincoln Project is. We can debate all day about their successfulness or not, but we can at least admit to the fact that they wielded some sizable amount of influence on the Democratic Party to try and please that base and try and win over that group of people. So I do think you're right that it is a worthwhile investment instead of trying to have to convince millions of people to organize in a single state. You're only targeting maybe tens of thousands, which can be a big help. So let me ask you this. In terms of the next step, you've clearly laid out 3 top priorities. But how do we try to get to there next? Is it just doing this? Are we looking for just a federal type approach? Or do you want to take this to the local levels as well? Like, where do you currently have this project organized? Is it just for federal races so far?
Yes, it is. It's just for federal races. What we did in 2020 was we crowdsourced the legislative package. You can read it on our website, anamericanunion.com. So 159 pages, and it spells out exactly how we would enact universal basic income, how we pay for it, how we would repeal the federal war on drugs, all the other police reforms, repealing mandatory minimums. All these things are spelled out. So it's one ready to go legislative package. Because, John, you probably observed this too, where candidates for public office make these grand promises about the things they're going to do, and then they go off to Washington, D.C., and it doesn't happen. And so this is about turning the model around. Let's spell out exactly what we expect Congress to do, and then hold them accountable to whether or not they accomplish that. But instead of accepting, just sort of general proposals, we the people can be specific. I guess that kind of goes back to what you said about the libertarian idea of kind of self-responsibility instead of trusting government to solve our problems. We can solve these problems together. We can work out these deals and work out a legislative package that 3.5% of Americans will feel very comfortable under, knowing that it'll improve the status quo.
Yeah, I think so too. Brian, my final question is, you mentioned that you crowdsourced this agenda. And I'd love to ask you what that process is like for you to determine what these key policies are. Obviously, you have 3 right now, but I'm going to make an assumption that over time, if we are hopefully successful in achieving those 3, there will be new priorities added to the list. What is that process in your mind of getting a consensus on what this swing group should be focused on?
That's a great question. And, it's not just up to me, but I think the benefit of focusing on these 3 right now is, one, they address Martin Luther King's triple evils, and that these are widely recognized problems in America. Similar to the Poor People's Campaign that focuses on these as well. They've added a couple other things, including environmental protection, and which is an important issue. Although I do agree with Andrew Yang, who said, you got to deal with people's economic insecurity first, so that they can look up and see what are you can't be concerned about what's going to happen to the penguins in 10 years if you can't pay your rent next month. But unfortunately, dealing with the environmental issues is stupidly polarizing. There is a large percentage of this country who will just tune all of that out. And so to build a block of swing voters, we left the environmental stuff out, at least directly. There is a carbon fee and dividend and a plastic fee and dividend that is part of the funding mechanism for UBI. And of course, downsizing the United States military, as you probably know, they're the largest producer of greenhouse gases on the planet.
Yeah, I think that does certainly help on the environmental side. I will give a little pushback. It is polarizing when it comes to like the punditry and the politicians. Republicans are very much against the whole climate change narrative, which is 100% factually true. And I'm not saying you believe this, but it's way more than just the penguins in 10 years fading away. But I do think a lot of conservatives are actually grappling with climate change being real. Like, this is one of those things where it's actually a 50-50 thing within their party right now on some of the priorities, mind you, like the carbon taxes. But I think we shouldn't take it for granted. I think the environment is also something that should be, as you said, on your radar for consideration going forward. But that being said, Brian, I want to thank you for coming on today. Some people really enjoyed some of the points you made here. We have a comment here saying you're making a pretty compelling case about the power of swing voters using Georgia. what do you have that people can go check out to get involved in this crowdsourcing effort if they're so inclined?
So, the best resource is our website, anamericanunion.com. There's also phoenixcongress2020.com, but we're no longer in 2020, so some of the information on there it's starting to get a little dated. But it goes into more detail about the sort of the process and the philosophy behind this behind this effort. So those two websites I'd recommend, and you can find me on Twitter at Phoenix Congress if you have more questions.
Wonderful. And so, Brian, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with the audience? Or, as we do every time on our Commoners Corner, we like to offer our guests here the opportunity to turn the tables on myself and ask me a question. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share with the People's Basics out there?
Well, sure. Well, let me ask you, John. I don't know where exactly you live, but let's say you have a Republican congressman and a Republican senator, which maybe are not your favorite.
Unfortunately, I'm in New York.
Okay. In that situation, if you could ensure if those candidates passed this legislative package prior to the election, because we don't trust them to keep their word afterward, would you be willing to pledge your vote to reelecting them if they actually got this done?
Like if a Republican actually got those 3 items done?
The one
legislative yeah, I mean, if it got done in one package, yeah, I'd reelect that person. Like, mind you, we would hopefully have another package and another cycle, but yeah, you have to reward them for doing what's on the best behalf of the people, even if you disagree with them on some other issues. The actions are what mattered.
Yeah, and so there's only one legislative package really every couple of years because we only have one chance to hold Congress directly accountable, which is how what the framers intended. But yeah, so, and as somebody who used to serve in the legislature, this is the way a lot of stuff gets done, is it all gets lumped together into one big package. You see this in Congress too. And then it all goes through. Because those packages are generally good overall. And nobody's supposed to like everything in this legislative package. Some people think $1,300 a month UBI goes too far. Some people think it doesn't go far enough. A public option for health care, some people think goes too far. Some people think it doesn't go far enough. But by putting all these things together, we can improve the status quo for every American, improve all of our quality of life. And that's what our people should inherit. They shouldn't have this problem.
I do wish that more often that it was holistically good packages. They're improving now under the more recent administration, but I do worry that sometimes when we have these massive bills, so much poison pills are added into it, where I'd rather just have smaller individual bills. But I get it. Sometimes you're using one issue to help get a little bit more polarizing issue across the finish line. But Brian, I want to thank you for coming on today to be able to share your perspective about this crowdsourcing effort that you have going on. Thank you for coming on to be able to explain that. We would love to have you back to report how you guys are progressing and seeing, is there now a sizable caucus that can swing these elections? So please come back sometime to report out how you guys are doing.
Thank you, John. It was a pleasure talking with you.
You as well. Okay, everyone. So that was our episode of A Commoner's Corner here on the People's Basics. We want to thank Brian again for coming on today. We want to thank you all for coming here and watching today live or on our replay. Make sure you like and share to help us grow the network at the People's Basics. And also check the description section so that you can find our link tree and sign up to come on to an episode yourself. We want to hear from everyone out there about what you all think the basic responsibility of government is to its people and how we can best organize to improve the lives of everyone in America and hopefully eventually the entire world. That being said, my friends, I hope you have a great rest of your day out there. Today's Thursday, so I want to remind you all, we're going to be having a new article coming out at noon. It'll be my own article, actually, that's been written this week on the 15 downsides of means testing and why we should be replacing it with a universal system. As well, we'll be having a live stream tonight from our team. We were off last week with some departures from our organization, but we're back again with a new team live stream. So check in tonight at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time for that as well. Friends, that'll do it for the People's Basics today. We will see you all later. We hope you have a great rest of your day out there. And as always, we hope you stay basic.